All right, we are back with episode 272 of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We've got 3 sponsors I want to tell you about today, Federico. We've got Pillow, SourceGraph, and Instabug. We just finished up talking a little bit about shortcuts and the reemergence of bugs and some of the things we've run into, as well as some thoughts on Twitter and what's going on these days with the takeover and the company going private. That was part of our App Stories Plus segment at the beginning. So, if you want to hear more about that and other extras that we do every single week for subscribers, go to appstories.plus and check it out.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that domain. So please visit that domain because it makes me really happy. Appstories.plus is so nice.
It is very, very good. Today, though, we're going to talk for the main show about gaming on Apple devices. This is something that we've touched on and off.
Fun one.
Right? Yeah. I mean, in the 5 years of App Stories, we have touched on this topic on and off several times, but I felt like it was time to kind of revisit it because things have changed. That mobile gaming is bigger than ever, and mobile consoles are a big deal too. And it just felt like we ought to take stock again of where Apple stands in this universe and what's going on with Apple and gaming in general, because there's a lot of aspects and a lot of facets of this that are fascinating to me. And I feel like it's just never really gotten off square one. I'm probably less optimistic now about Apple and gaming than I've ever been, which is, I guess, a bit of a spoiler, but we ought to talk about all the aspects of it because there's a lot going on here on all the different platforms.
Yeah, there's different sort of pieces and like sections of this story, of this problem that I wanna talk about. And I guess when we talk about Apple devices, obviously we mean iPhone, iPad, and Mac. We are including the Mac, I think. We probably wouldn't have years ago, but now a couple of things have happened. Apple Arcade as being available on the Mac as well, and also the support for third-party game controllers, as well as the fact that macOS can run apps that are not available on iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute. And obviously, we're also including tvOS because of Apple Arcade and controllers. So it goes without saying, these Apple Arcade games, you can play on every Apple device, including the Mac. So we're taking a look at the full spectrum of Apple devices and how they relate to the modern gaming, practices and the modern gaming industry. And I want to start right there, John. You are my controller expert.
I am. I'm obsessed with controllers.
You have an unhealthy obsession with controllers.
Yes.
So can you tell just how many do you have?
Oh boy, they're all in a.
We're not expecting this question, were you?
No, I've probably a dozen maybe.
A dozen. Okay. Well,
I've got.
okay.
It depends how you count, right? I've got some of the 8-bit Do, 8-bit Do, or whatever, however you pronounce that. Got a bunch of those for various Nintendo systems. I've got Xbox controllers. I've got DualShock controllers. I've got PS4 I've got DualShock and DualSense controllers for Sony. What else do I have? I've got the Backbone One, which works with the iPhone. I've got a bunch of other iPhone controllers, although most of those have been retired, and I got rid of some of them because really the Backbone One, with some caveats, is by far the best iPhone controller, I think. I like the way it works with the iPhone sitting, cradled between the two grips of the controller.
Okay, so the Backbone One came out a couple of years ago. It's the controller that, as you mentioned, it lets you place the iPhone in between these two halves of the controller. You got it's almost like a Nintendo Switch without the screen in the middle, the screen being your iPhone that you need to place in between these two parts of the controller, which of course can extend and supports iPhones of different sizes. Now, the Backbone, there's a couple of things I want to mention, and I also want to get your opinion on this. First, you need to get an adapter if you have an iPhone 13 right? I
Yes.
put in this request. They had an online form that you needed to fill, and essentially I received for free. That was nice.
Free, but you had to pay for the shipping. So I mean,
Did I? I'm not sure. I don't. Maybe
I
I
did.
did.
I paid $5 for the shipping, I think.
Okay.
I mean, not a lot of money, but on the other hand, I mean, this is one of my biggest gripes with the Backbone One is that I got mine not too long after it came out, which was in the iPhone 12 cycle, fairly late, I believe, and so I didn't have it for that long before I had to get the adapter, which was too bad. And that's
Right.
it's a design thing. It had a bigger camera bump, which was the problem.
Yeah, you need to get this extra piece of plastic that ensures that the iPhone 13, because of its bigger camera bump, can fit inside the Backbone controller. The second aspect of the Backbone that I want to mention is the app. So it's never been clear to me how this was possible, but something that I love, and I mean, I kind of know the answer but that's based on my personal speculation. The Backbone app, in addition to doing pretty standard things like showing you a gallery of popular games, there's a button on the controller that lets you save game screenshots and clips. Those are all part of the Replay Kit framework API for developers. There's something else that the Backbone app can do via the Backbone controller. If you press a button in the current game that you are playing on your iPhone, that game gets pinned to the top section of the Backbone app on the iPhone. It's still not clear to me how an accessory can capture the name and metadata of the app that's currently shown on screen on your iPhone.
Right, and it becomes that app, that Backbone One app, becomes a catalog of the games that you've got stored on your iPhone.
And a launcher for those games.
And a launcher that'll launch you right back into it. And it's fantastic. I think it's an amazing feature. They've also done a lot with Xbox Cloud Gaming and with PS Remote Play. You can do all those things on the Backbone One and in its software. And I don't know how they're doing it either. I can't prove it, but I think they've got some sort of special deal going with Apple that they're getting some privileges that they wouldn't normally be able to get and that not all developers can get. I know that happens here and there. And of course, people don't talk about it because I don't think Apple wants to advertise that. But I'm pretty sure that that's what's going on here because I asked a lot of developers about it when it first came out because I was shocked that this was possible. And I never got a really good definitive answer other than it must be that they've got special entitlements for their app.
Yeah, usually when you got that answer, that's usually the answer. Yeah, like that's usually the what's going on, right? It's a special entitlement, some kind of private API that they do not grant to any other developer except for the partners. In this case, the maker of an arguably incredible accessory. So the Backbone One.
Right. It's a little bit, I think, Federico, you could think of it a little bit like CarPlay or something where that's a little more public, though, where you have to actually apply to be part of that program. Like not just anybody can use the CarPlay APIs. But I think this is the same sort of thing potentially, but, just done with select partners and not kind of something where you fill out a form on the web.
Yeah. And usually these deals get made in secret, and that's how things go. So the Backbone One, I think, I agree. It's the best integrated iPhone controller, right? If you just want to have this portable experience that's reminiscent of a Nintendo Switch, you slide your iPhone in the middle of the Backbone One. When you're not using it, it folds, so it's portable enough to just toss in a bag or something. I love the D-pad. I like the buttons. I like the functionality of the Backbone button. I hope that I'm pretty sure, like, if the iPhone 13 Pro was a problem, I imagine that the even bigger camera bump of the rumored iPhone 14 this year will be a bigger problem. So hopefully we'll see a Backbone 2 as a follow-up to the Backbone 1. I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's been out for quite a while now. I'm a little surprised that we never saw a revision for the iPhone 13, but Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get something for the 14. I do think it is worth emphasizing that the buttons and the D-pads on the D-pad on this thing are really good. That one of the reasons this controller works is not just the software, but it is a quality piece of controller hardware compared to all the other ones that I've used over the years. A lot of the iOS compatible controllers that you find are kind of junky. The one thing about this hardware that I don't like is that adapter, because the problem with the adapter, as well as it works, is that it doesn't stay on by itself very well. It just kind of wraps around the band that's in the middle that goes behind your iPhone when you put it in the controller, and it's a little grippy. It's like a piece of rubber that goes on there and makes your phone fit, but it falls off very easily. And I'm amazed that I haven't lost it yet, like permanently, and had to order another one because it just doesn't stay on, which is, I think, really takes away from the experience having to use that adapter. Yeah. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can improve your health and well-being in more ways than you can ever imagine. Pillow is a simple app that can help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or iPad, you can do that too, with the press of a button before going to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, or other noises at night that might be affecting your sleep. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of those sounds during your sleep session and give you a rating of the exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. Naps can help boost your productivity and focus, so if you have a chance to take one, you can use Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow can also wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting from watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is also very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device or in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow. You can use it totally anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great free features that you can use every single day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's a 7-day free trial too. Just go to pillow.app to learn more and get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you can also use, as John mentioned, other Bluetooth controllers, DualSense, DualShock, Xbox wireless controller with an iPhone, iPad, Mac, and Apple TV. There, I would recommend going on Amazon. If you play on an iPhone, look for, there are these cradles, these like accessories that allow you to attach the phone on top of a DualSense, DualShock, or Xbox controller. They're like this plastic. How would you describe them, John? Like
they're clips.
Clips, yes. They clip onto the controller. Yes, they are clips that clip onto the controller, and then you place your iPhone in the clip as well, and so you can play with your controller in your hands and the iPhone sort of floating above the controller. You can get them for cheap on Amazon for like $10-15 or something.
Right. And they're pretty adjustable too, which helps with the balance, because it is kind of a heavy package when you add a phone on top of a controller, and depending how high above it it's sitting, it can be a little awkward unless you get it balanced just right. I like the one that you suggested to me months ago, which is the one that uses MagSafe. That's probably my second favorite controller. It's not a controller at all. It's the clip that goes onto the Xbox controller and then uses MagSafe to attach the phone.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the clip that supports the iPad mini. Because when you think about it, like the weight of the iPad mini without a case is not that different from the weight of an iPhone 13 Pro Max with a case on. So
That's true.
You could potentially, someone should make a controller clip that lets you attach the iPad mini in landscape mode floating on top of the controller. I'm still waiting for that.
Game Vice, which I don't think is making hardware
No, they're
anymore.
not.
They used
They
to
also
have
sued Nintendo.
I know. Well, that was one. When I saw that news, I was like, oh, they're in trouble. They're hoping that their litigation will save their company, and I don't know where that went. But they used to have a controller. It was a little bit like a Backbone One, not as nice, but similar, that fit on the iPad Mini, the old Lightning connector iPad Mini, and it was pretty good. But I don't think anybody else is making that kind of thing these days for the model that has the USB-C connector.
There have long been rumors of an Apple controller, right?
Yes.
They picked up again a couple of years ago. I think it was 2020. At some point, I was convinced that Apple was making a game controller, especially because they were also making Apple Arcade, right? And obviously, knowing Apple, they like to sell hardware at a premium price. And so it only seemed natural to me to see an Apple controller with, 3 months of Apple Arcade built in as an offer. But they never made one, and at this point, I'm not sure they should, especially when the DualSense exists. And I kind of wanted to get your take on this.
I agree with you, which is, however, why I'm so surprised that these rumors have popped up again in the last 2 or 3 months, because they definitely have popped back up. And initially, I thought, well, the support for Sony and Microsoft controllers was to fill the gap when Apple Arcade launched, but Apple will eventually do their own controller that's tuned to Apple Arcade. They've never done that, and now, in fact, they have even deeper integration with things like the DualSense, with the haptic feedback, and all the buttons, all the triggers, everything all the different things that are unique both to a Sony controller or a Microsoft controller have been incorporated now and work. And developers have access to those things. So I don't see a reason for Apple to necessarily do it, because both Microsoft and Sony have a lot of experience making controllers, and they're very good at it. They're both very good controllers in different ways. What I've always thought though with Apple though is that they could maybe incorporate these with AirPods to make it really easy to connect sound through your AirPods, or connect to the Apple TV using some of the technology that's layered on top of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in order to connect very easily and quickly, things like that, where you don't have to do this dance where maybe you have an old Sony DualShock controller around and you have it connected to your Apple TV, but then you want to move it and connect it to your Mac. And sometimes it's really hard to it's fiddly sometimes to disconnect from one device and connect to another. It's just not as easy with regular Bluetooth connections compared to what you have with something like AirPods.
I kind of wonder if these rumors of an Apple controller are about a controller that they are making for the headset that they're working on.
Interesting. That's an interesting theory. I could see that. I could definitely
because in that
that
case, you would need a controller. If you want to enable like gaming capabilities, you would need a physical controller, to something like, what the Oculus Quest has, or what Sony is working on for PSVR 2, which is launching this year. You have these controllers that have multiple, touch inputs. They have buttons, triggers, haptic feedback, one on each hand, and maybe it's something like that. And I could see Apple making that kind of controller. At this point, I struggle to imagine a classic sort of traditional console-like controller from Apple. Now, before we get into playing games sort of offline, like downloaded games on your computer, on your device, I want to have a sort of a quick parenthesis about streaming games. Because this wasn't possible a few years ago. For sure, it wasn't possible when we began MacStories 5 years ago. But it is totally possible and a reality today. There's multiple services that allow you to play cloud games via streaming, right? There's Xbox cloud gaming. But there's also, I did a bit of research on this a while back. apparently the best performance on cloud gaming right now is the most expensive tier of NVIDIA GeForce Now. Apparently, they're using a server rack of the 3080 GPUs to power that tier of cloud streaming with multiple data centers across the United States. So NVIDIA GeForce Now, they have some AAA console and PC games, obviously, but I haven't really played with that myself. What I can tell you is that on my iPhone and iPad, I have actually played Xbox cloud games. I have done PlayStation Remote Play, and I've also done, obviously this is for local streaming. I think it also supports outside of the home streaming, but I've never configured that myself. But I have done local PC streaming. I have a gaming PC now, as we established on Unwind a few weeks ago. Moonlight. Moonlight is this incredible PC software that has an iPhone and iPad app. The app for Apple devices is also compatible with game controllers, including the latest game controller APIs. But I was able to do like 4K streaming thanks to my Wi-Fi 6 network at home from my gaming PC to my iPhone and iPad with support for HDR and ProMotion refresh rates. Let me tell you, Crysis Remastered looked real good on an iPhone or iPad via streaming.
Wow. I've never heard of Moonlight. I guess that's because I'm not into PC gaming in general, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
We do have a PC here that I could use this for.
You do have and I have recently discovered that you have access to the PC. I thought it was just for your son.
Yes. I have very limited access, Federico, but occasionally I do have access to it. And I've been toying with the idea of PC gaming, of course. So yes, I think Moonlight for PC streaming sounds like something I ought to give a try. I've tried both. I mean, I've used both Xbox Cloud Gaming as well as PS Remote Play and even Stadia, which
oh my God, I forgot to mention Stadia.
Stadia, which is, I'm not even sure if it's really much of a thing anymore, to be honest. It was fine. Like all Google's services that you sign up for, once you sign up for it, it's very hard to unsign up for it because Google doesn't actually have like support services for a lot of its services. And that's just a little bit of a problem when you're paying money and you don't know where to go to unsubscribe. I eventually unsubscribed. I did that for just a short time because I actually went to the Game Developer Conference in I think 2018, maybe 2019 in the before times. And I saw the launch of Stadia, which was very exciting at the time. And then Google didn't seem to really get gaming so well. So that hasn't really amounted to all that much.
Some real-time follow-up as we're recording this.
Oh, yeah?
NVIDIA just announced, as of a few minutes ago, that GeForce Now is gaining native support for Apple Silicon on macOS.
Really?
So, yeah,
wow.
They are doing they are updating the GeForce Now app for macOS with support for the M1 for Apple Silicon, native support for Apple Silicon.
Nice.
So
I'm
go check it out.
That out.
What's the most expensive tier look like on GeForce Now? Well, I have. No, I got the pricing in euros, so you need to check it out for yourself. Let's see.
What are you? You're not subscribed to it though, are you?
I am not at the moment. So it's called Oh wow, it's not cheap. So if you want the RTX 3080 tier, that's the one with the 3080 GPU and ray tracing enabled. It's for me in Italy, 20 euros a month.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's $25, maybe. Well, it's not cheap. Or you could get the standard one, and it's 10 euros. So I assume it's $10. But yeah, we should look into this. Because they, that maybe just for a couple of months, see what it's like. Anyway, you mentioned PlayStation Remote Play. I have also used that. I have it on my enabled on my PS5. Something that I want to point out, I think I mentioned this on Unwind a couple of weeks ago. Little known fact, there is a native PlayStation Remote Play app for macOS. Not a lot of people know about this. You gotta go.
I didn't at the time. No, I downloaded it.
You downloaded it, so you gotta go on the Sony website to download it. But then you can play. You can remote play your PlayStation games on a Mac with obviously support for a game controller. What else? Obviously, Sony is changing its approach to streaming.
Right.
with the PlayStation Plus service that is that is switching to a 3-tiered system this year. And if I'm not mistaken, the more expensive tiers will include access to PlayStation Now, which is the cloud streaming service from Sony. And Sony is revising the catalog of games, both new games and older PlayStation 1, PSP, Vita, PS2, and PS3 games that will be available for streaming. In fact, you, John, I believe you sent me a link yesterday that Sony has opened up a preservation team inside of PlayStation. They have a game preservation team at Sony, which is also fascinating, especially considering what we're going to talk about in a few minutes regarding Apple's approach to this.
Right. Yeah, it is fascinating. I think they probably have recognized that there's money to be made in bringing back old games. Obviously Microsoft has a deep catalog with the Series X and S, and Nintendo has older games available through its online service. It's not it. I think they're viewed. I think these older games are viewed generally as like a value add to various subscriptions, where it just gives you a deeper catalog that you can offer, just like the video streaming services offer older TV shows and movies as well. So I think that I suspect that's where Sony's heading, but we'll have to see what their plans are.
Yeah. In any case, you can play. You can remote play on your iPhone, iPad, and Mac, but not on the Apple TV because there's no. I don't think there's a PS Remote Play app on Apple TV.
Right. No, I don't think so either. Yeah, the Apple TV. Apple TV and games. I don't know about you, but I don't play them on my Apple TV. Ever.
No,
Ever.
Not really. I play on my TV, meaning on my television, but not on Apple TV.
Right, exactly. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. So you've hired a brilliant developer. That's great, but now you have to get them onboarded. If your company is growing, onboarding new developers will be a common occurrence, but it's a big undertaking every time. One of the biggest challenges for new hires is to get up to speed with the project their new team is working on. This can be tricky if code bases that your developers are working in are already large. Thankfully, SourceGraph makes it easy to move fast, even in those big code bases. Developers know that knowledge is useful when it's findable. Centralization is helpful, but given the fact that most companies store knowledge in at least 2 different locations, how do you make knowledge accessible to those that need it? As a code-based intelligence platform, SourceGraph gives developers what they need to drive their own learning over time and in different situations. Teams without SourceGraph need to rely on asking colleagues and reviewing out-of-date documentation, which is cumbersome and time-consuming. But with SourceGraph, every developer can search across millions of repositories to find specific code, saving time for themselves and everyone else. So, when questions do come up, you know it's the big stuff that's worthy of the extra time. SourceGraph was created to make developers' lives easier, and today they work with leading companies across every industry, including 3 out of 5 of the top tech companies: PayPal, Uber, Plaid, GE, Reddit, and Atlassian. Visit about.sourcegraph.com to learn more. That's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Or just click the link in the show notes to let them know you heard about them from us. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the show.
All right, let's switch to more traditional sources of games on Apple devices. Obviously, the first one is the App Store, right? But let me ask you this, John. Do you still buy games on the App Store? Like
I
purchase
do.
games?
I do.
What
once
kind
in
of
a
games?
while. So, Chrono Trigger I purchased recently.
Okay.
I purchased. There's a game where you what is this game where you play as a game developer? I forget the name of the game. Where you're developing games. It's like a retro pixel art game.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It's made by a Japanese
Dev Story.
Game Dev Story, right? I think it's a Japanese developer. But in any event, I bought that recently. Let me think. What else? I've bought, let me look at my phone because I have another one here, I think. Yeah, those two are ones that I've purchased recently. I don't do it very often. I actually do like, I was concerned when Apple Arcade started that maybe all that would be left in the App Store were kind of, junky mobile apps that use gems and things like that. But it hasn't really turned out to be true. There's still a lot of really good indie games in there. I bought Unreal Life is another one. So those are like three that I've bought in like the last 2 or 3 months, I guess. I don't do it often. I don't play games on my Apple devices a lot compared to other sources, but there are still some really good games there. And I think that the indie game, and especially these kind of retro style games, is where you find the most overlap across different platforms between consoles and Apple devices, because they're not demanding games from a technological standpoint in terms of what, CPU and GPU constraints there might be on Apple devices compared to consoles or PCs. But that's really where the overlap exists. And I think given the quality of the screens of things like the iPad Pro and the iPhone in particular, that those are some of the best platforms to play those kinds of games if they support the right kind of devices, like controllers, for instance. Like I don't really like playing with touch controls if it's a game that's intended for a controller. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of games that come out on iOS, they come out on multiple platforms at the same time, and they neglect the native features of iOS. Things like controller support or iCloud syncing. Now, some of the better titles do incorporate those, and those are what I'm always looking for, the ones that go the extra mile and actually tailor the experience to iOS, because if they do, I think playing with the Backbone 1 and my iPhone 13 Pro Max can be oftentimes the very best way to play some of those games.
All right. Yeah. I asked you this because I honestly don't remember the last time I bought a game on my iPhone and iPad, but I know. So that's the thing. I know what I will buy next. That's the new game by Zach Gage, Not Words, that you reviewed on MacStories a couple of days ago.
It's so good. That's a whole other category, Federico. I mean, to me, the things that work best, at least that suit my taste the most on the App Store, are kind of the indie games, as well as Zach Gage's game is an indie game, but it's also kind of a traditional puzzle mobile game that's not junked up with a bunch of gems and things like that. So I like those games too, word puzzles or simple short-term interaction type of games that work well on a phone.
Yeah, so for those types of indie games, like the games like Zach Gage's games that you do not usually find on Apple Arcade, like that's the kind of title that I still find myself sort of clicking by on the App Store for.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Instabug. Building mobile apps presents challenges. Bugs, crashes, and performance issues can be a nightmare for developers. But what if you could not only detect all of these issues, but also get a holistic understanding of the quality of your app from your user's point of view? Instabug's lightweight SDK grabs all of the insights you need to build top-quality apps through comprehensive bug and crash reports, performance monitoring, and real-time user feedback, all in one SDK. With Instabug, you can continuously monitor and measure performance of your app as perceived by your users. Empower those users to report issues and ask questions seamlessly right inside your app. Get all of the information you need about bugs, crashes, and other issues, and get them fixed in record time, all with a focus on privacy and security. And you don't have to worry about the hassles of switching to a new tool. It only takes a minute to integrate Instabug into your app, and it fits right within your workflow, with support for Jira, Slack, Trello, GitHub, Zendesk, and over 10 other popular tools. Join over 25,000 top mobile developers around the world who use Instabug to ship high-quality apps. Go to try.instabug.com/appstories today. That's try.instabug.com/appstories. Our thanks to Instabug for their support of the show.
Apple Arcade, it feels like a completely different story, right?
Yes.
It started off as this promising service where Apple could offer a mix of the classic, sort of quick bite, mobile gaming experiences with these puzzle games and, games that you would play in short bursts on an iPhone, mixed in with some more console-like quality, story-driven, narrative games like adventure games, role-playing games. I remember, Beneath a Steel Sky, for example, being one of the titles that were advertised at launch, and Ocean Horn 2. Those more again console-like, maybe is a good way to describe them. Games that were promising, to offer a different type of experience on Apple devices. Now, slowly, that narrative has changed on Apple Arcade, and it seems to me like now it's mostly designed to sell people on a subscription that includes access to mobile games, meaning, puzzle games, clicker games, that kind of stuff, family and multiplayer games, and then a selection of remastered classics that are coming back to Apple Arcade with support for Retina displays, iCloud save data, game controllers, but those are still old catalog games that are being remastered for Apple Arcade and included as effectively as back catalog content. But my question is, and I think I know the answer already because we talk about this stuff privately. But
Yes.
Does it feel to you like Apple Arcade is making any meaningful impact on the gaming industry? And the follow-up question is, should Apple care about that, or is it just fine to have a subscription service that has that type of content with no bigger aspirations?
Well, I don't think that they're having an impact, and not a meaningful one, at least. And so I feel like Apple Arcade isn't having an impact because what they're doing, while I appreciate the fact that they are preserving some older games and making them available again that had kind of fallen by the wayside, they're not really adding anything new to the conversation in terms of gaming. There aren't any cutting edge games there. I feel like it's just kind of bland and boring for the most part. What's there? I mean, there are exceptions, there are gems, there are some excellent games there, but it's just, to me, it's just kind of, it's not exciting in any way, shape, or form. And is that okay? It's not okay to me personally. I wish they would do more because I feel like there's potential there. But I think that the barriers to doing more are just too high at this point. For instance, the fact that you have to use Metal, which is the framework for, the graphics framework that Apple uses. That's not used by anybody else really. I mean, developers have to kind of tailor their games specifically for that. It's not as easy to move things over to Apple's platforms as a result. And so that right there is a pretty big barrier. And I think Apple's content to making this part of a package that sells, the Apple One bundle, but I really do wish it was something more, that it could sustain itself as a standalone product, where I'm not sure that it really is doing that at this point, and I'm not sure that it ever will. And maybe they're okay with that, but given the emphasis on services, I would think that Apple would want it to be viable as a standalone product and as part of a bundle, not just an add-on to a bundle to kind of make it worth doing. And I just don't feel like many people would subscribe to Apple Arcade by itself without something more.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think the problem is that just a lot of stuff on Apple Arcade is just boring. It's just, it feels, a lot of the things there just feel uninspired. And you look, for example, at what some publishers are doing with indie games. Like you look, for example, at Annapurna Interactive. You look at Devolver Digital, right? What those folks are doing with fostering this environment of indie developers, of indie creators, and what they announce and release on, usually on PC and Steam, and later on Nintendo Switch and other consoles. But that output from those publishers is incredible. right? And you just don't see that kind of thing happen on the App Store or Apple Arcade for that matter, unless it's that type of experience where it's family friendly, it's got multiplayer, or it's an iPhone game that you can play, in short sessions. It makes me sad on one hand, but on the other, I'm not totally surprised because I knew that we all knew that Apple wouldn't take any major risks in terms of publishing, that potentially controversial game, right? And I mean, we have countless examples of Apple asking developers to pull video games from the App Store that talked about political themes or societal themes in the past, like whether it's about democracy or the war or talking about depression, right? All these sensitive topics. Apple, and that is my single biggest issue with Apple and gaming, is they do not believe, or at least maybe some of them do, but at a corporate level, their decisions show a company that does not believe in gaming as an art form that can spark a conversation regarding more adult and serious and complicated themes. And so what we are left with is, in this case of Apple Arcade, a subscription service where you get your family-friendly, PG-13 stuff, obviously, but none of those games really have the depth to be remembered long-term for anything. There's a couple of gems, but hey, do you remember? What can you tell me, John, about the latest Lego Brawler multiplayer game on Apple Arcade? Nothing. It just looks like anything else.
Right.
And so,
right. And the best Lego game is on PS5 right now. Anyway, I mean, the Star Wars one with the the great graphics and ray tracing and everything. It's a different mix and kind of a watered down version of games on Apple Arcade, I think. And yeah, I guess I'm kind of over it. I still hold out some hope that maybe there will be more. I mean, we have seen arcade diversify and add more variety over time, but I just don't think that they've gone far enough. And I think you're absolutely right that they don't get gaming as an art form. I don't think that Apple really sees games as a different thing from apps themselves, except for maybe in the business models, from the business model standpoint, that they're obviously very happy with games because games generate a lot of revenue. But I don't think they fundamentally see the difference between a game and, say, a task manager. It's just a different binary that's being served by an app store.
Yeah, that's exactly and I mean, you can see this in, for example, just last week, we saw that Apple had started reaching out to developers, asking them to update their old apps for the App Store, or they would get removed in the near future from the App Store. And that's part of the, what is called the App Improvement Program, which is a new thing, I guess, on the App Store.
It's an Orwellian name, really.
It really is.
We're going to improve your app by getting rid of it.
Yes. So this program, like the gist of it is either you update your app or it's gone, or we're gonna pull it from the App Store because it doesn't meet our compatibility standards. And I understand that, right? I understand that you want to make sure that some apps are functional and supported on the latest devices. But the thing is, video games are different, and this is another major problem that Apple does not seem to understand. Video games operate differently from apps because video games are an art form. Imagine if you couldn't watch an old movie anymore. Imagine if you couldn't read an old book anymore because the font is not big enough for modern standards. Obviously, that sounds ridiculous, right? That sounds totally ridiculous. So what do you mean? It's an old movie. Even if it's old, I can still enjoy an old movie. Or if it's an old book, I can still enjoy an old book.
Right. You don't take it off the streaming service because there's no new features being added to the old movie. I mean,
you don't take a movie out of streaming services because it's in black and white or because it's not in 4K. It's that product of its time, and it stays like that. I could make the same argument for many, many hundreds, probably, of indie games, right, on the App Store. that
Mm-hmm.
sure may not be full screen on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, may not have support for iCloud save data, but they
They have an
still
old
run.
keyboard,
They have an
or
old
something
keyboard,
like that, right?
but they still run. You can still play those games. You can still enjoy those games, and you can still install them and use them and play them, right? And Apple does not seem to understand this when it comes to game preservation, which is another huge obstacle to gaming on the App Store. I personally wrote about this a couple of years ago for the 10th anniversary of the App Store in 2018. Game preservation on the App Store has always been a problem. Now, Apple, on the one hand, they've been doing something with Apple Arcade in bringing back those classics and remastering those classics for Apple Arcade. I could say, well, duh, of course they do. They need to fill the back catalog, so it's only functional because of the service, that they're charging people for.
Right.
But on the other hand, why go after developers in this way, right? You don't go to an old developer and say, hey, I'm gonna, you can't play this old Super Nintendo game anymore. Games are a different story, and they require exceptions. And Apple seems to be unwilling to make those exceptions. And that's the problem.
Yeah, it's too bad. And it's one of those things that bums me out. And so does, as we talked about a little bit, is the hardware aspect of this. Because when you think about it, there's such a resurgence these days in handheld devices for playing mobile games of all sorts. We've got the Play Date, and we've got the Neo, and we've got the Steam Deck, and all these different experiments in hardware for playing mobile games. And Apple is a hardware company that makes phenomenal mobile devices. I would love to have a real gaming rig that's mobile made by Apple, but I just don't think that'll ever happen either.
Here's another, maybe, another question for you. Isn't it surprising that the latest mobile game that really became a worldwide phenomenon is not an iPhone game, it's not an Android game, it's Wordle on a website?
It's a web app that's like self-contained and in the code right on the page, right? I mean, it's about as simple as you can possibly get. And to me, that's the beauty of games, right? Is that they don't necessarily have to be these incredibly technologically advanced games. They just have to be fun. And I think that is part of what's missing from a lot of what we see with Apple. Now, I don't want to overstate the case because I do still think there are a lot of great games on the App Store.
Yes.
But I don't think that Apple understands necessarily what makes a game a good game, right? It's like Zach Gage's game, Not Words, is an incredible game because it's really simple to pick up and understand, but challenging in a very fun way. And it takes someone who understands games deeply, like Zach Gage does, to really make an excellent game like that works. And I just don't think Apple sees or understands the formula.
Yeah. I mean, why isn't that game on Apple Arcade? Like, if I were Apple and if I knew that this game was coming, I would have tried everything to make sure that game was an Apple Arcade, and maybe even an Apple Arcade exclusive. But that's not the case. Now, obviously, we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but we can only look at the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is Apple Arcade is kind of just boring. And sure, there are some old games that are great on Apple Arcade, but those are old games. We played them before. Alta's Adventure and Alta's Odyssey, I've played them before many, many years ago. And guess what? When they came out, they were indie games on the App Store, released by indie developers as standalone games on the App Store. So if only Apple, here's how I would wrap things up. And maybe, there's a whole different beast in this story, which is emulation on Apple platforms.
Right.
But honestly, that kind of feels like a standalone topic for the future, because emulation on Apple platforms, it goes really deep, and we can talk. We have at a minimum an half an hour just to cover all the possible options, because I've been doing a lot of research there. But here's how I would wrap things up. If only Apple cared about thinking about the gaming experiences on its platforms half as much as Valve cares for Steam, we would have a great product and we would have a great system. You know, Steam may not be the most visually appealing service in the
Right.
world, but it's full of features and collections and offers, and the multiplayer component is great, and the friends component is great, and it's a vibrant place. You know, you open Steam, you're a gamer, you open Steam, it's amazing. There's always stuff going on, and obviously it's for PC gaming, and that's a more complicated story. But imagine if Game Center and Apple Arcade and the App Store were really optimized for gaming, with a care for gamers, and having video games that make an impact, that you remember, that you don't just play when you're, you know, idling out for 5 minutes. Games that make an impact on you. And I feel like they had that opportunity a few years ago. And now we've all just sort of accepted that that's not the case. And that makes me sad. But I also know that me being sad doesn't really change anything. You know,
No.
it's just what it is. And it's fine. We accept it. But things could be better. And I don't know, maybe with the headset, maybe with AR and VR, I'm sure they will launch another app store for those platforms. And I'm sure there will be games. And maybe something will happen there. I don't know.
Maybe, but are you optimistic given where we've been? I mean, I'm not.
No, honestly, not at all.
I mean, yeah, I think what makes us sad is the opportunity that has been missed. I think that what might have been if Apple had maybe paid more attention to gamers and gaming and the experience, as opposed to, I think it really is. It's become the App Store is largely an idle clicker type of place, and that's a shame, because there's a place for those games, but it's a very small, narrow corner of the gaming industry. So, all right, Federico, I hate to end on kind of a sad note for App
No, let's end on a
Stories,
positive note. Go play Not Words by Zach Gage. Get it from the App Store. That's one beautiful thing to happen for video games on the App Store lately. Go get the game.
It is. Zach always comes out with a fantastic game that takes existing concepts and fun games, turns them on their head, and comes up with something new. And this is right in the line with all those other Zach Gage classics. So check it out. I also want to thank our sponsors for this episode. That is Pillow, SourceGraph, and Instabug. If you'd like to get extra long episodes of App Stories, you can subscribe to App Stories Plus. It comes out early on Sundays. And it's got me and Federico in high bitrate audio, no ads, and as I said, it's extended. And you can find that at Federico's favorite URL, appstories.plus. I'm pretty sure this, next to MacStories.net, appstories.plus is your absolute favorite URL, right, Federico?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true.
All right. Well, you can find the two of us over at MacStories too. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.